I'm delighted to say I'm joined in the studio by John Bercow, former Speaker of the House of Commons and MP for Buckingham. Wonderful to see you, John. Thank you so much for coming in this Sunday morning.
Tom, thank you. It's a pleasure to see you and to be on your programme.
Well, listen, I wonder how you view the state of our politics and the questions about the Prime Minister's integrity from afar now that you're out of it.
Well, I think the situation is very serious. I served alongside 4 Prime Ministers during my tenure as Speaker: Gordon Brown, David Cameron, Theresa May and Boris Johnson. My feeling is that none of the previous 3 was under the spotlight and subject to interrogation and the casting of doubt on the scale or in the manner that the current Prime Minister is. You mentioned a few moments ago, almost posing, Tom, as a question, the issue of whether who paid for curtains matters. Do people care? Are they interested? Or do they simply take the view that it's small scale, that it's tittle-tattle, that it's second, third, fourth or fifth tier as a matter of discussion? My own view is that the truth matters, Parliament matters, and telling the truth to and in Parliament matters. And I would go so far as to assert, Tom, that that is the case whether it shows up in the polls now or is a motivating factor in the elections. In other words, it's not just a question of current public opinion, it's a question of a verity, a truth, an important principle, the sanctity of truth. I think that the reality is that it will matter to some people and not to other people. But this argument that says, oh, well, it doesn't matter because people are more concerned about and appreciative of and thankful for the rollout of the vaccine is, in my view, neither here nor there. What really counts is that as a matter of principle, people should tell the truth and there shouldn't be a cavalier disregard for it.
I agree with you, but I think what does, on the face of it, if you were being really robust about it, if you were being ruthless about it, is I think that this Prime Minister displays a ruthlessness about winning that is, that has got him to the position that he's got to. What does principle matter when, in practice, it's not motivating people to change their votes?
Well, I think that when you see something wrong taking place, either as a commentator you observe it or as a member of the public or more particularly as a legislator, there is a responsibility to point it out. And what isn't a matter of concern at one time can subsequently become a matter of concern. Look, let's take a long view. The Prime Minister came through a life-threatening condition, COVID afflicting him. There have been huge depredations for the country as a whole. It has been a horrendous, debilitating and unsettling period. And a lot of people may say, well, what really matters is relief from a mortal threat. And I don't use that term rhetorically, but factually. And in those circumstances, they might at the moment say, well, we're not too bothered about who paid for this or when or who paid first or what the total cost was or whatever. They may do, but it's no good pointing these things out only at a later stage. Whenever there is error, wherever there is untruth, wherever there is falsehood, it must be spoken out against with crystal clarity. So that's my view. It's a matter of principle, not of exigency.
And who holds the feet to the fire? That has to be Parliament's job. If it's not the electorate who, for whatever reason, it's that would be your view of Parliament's job. I thought of you the other day, John, because I saw what Labour had been saying about the Prime Minister. They used the term the Prime Minister has lied. Now, I wonder in your day whether that was heard in Parliament, whether you would describe that as unparliamentary or whether you think that bit might be closer to the truth.
The answer is I think it very much depends on the context. I think somebody asking a question about whether something is a lie or untruthful, in my opinion, depending upon the context and the circumstances, is legitimate. I think to cast an aspersion and actually to say you are dishonest is most definitely a breach of parliamentary etiquette, and I called it out a number of times myself. I had reason only on 3 occasions, Tom, to ask people, to instruct people, to order people to leave the chamber and the Palace of Westminster for the rest of the day, and in each case it was because of an accusation of lying. So that is out of order, but there is one exception. If there is a substantive motion before the House about the conduct of a particular member and an accusation of dishonesty, it is then orderly. So, for example, in 2011, when Chris Bryant, the Labour MP for Rhondda, had a motion down about the behaviour of the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Jeremy Hunt, it was, in my view, and I made this ruling, in order. It may have been tasteless and unpopular, but it was in order for him to question the honesty of Jeremy Hunt, because that was the subject matter of the debate.
Do you think that Boris Johnson, as Prime Minister, treats the House of Commons and Parliament with respect? Did you find that when you were Speaker in the chair when he was in the early days of his time as Prime Minister?
No, is the short answer to that. I always found the Prime Minister personally amiable, but that wasn't the question you asked me. You asked me, did I think that he treated Parliament with respect? And the honest answer to that is that no, I didn't. I'm sure he was doing his best as Prime Minister. How did he not treat Parliament with respect? First of all, and most importantly, he sought to shut down Parliament for 5 weeks in an unprecedentedly long closure and prorogation of the House in the run-up to the Brexit summit. Now, that showed irreverence, disdain and contempt for Parliament. So people often say, and maybe your listeners will be foremost amongst them, well, politicians or ex-politicians don't give straight answers. They prevaricate, they procrastinate, they sit on the fence, they duck the question, they insist on talking about something else. You've asked me a straightforward question. Did he treat Parliament with respect during my tenure? Answer, no. He was personally courteous to me, but he wasn't courteous to the House of Commons.
The question back to you then, I guess, would be, did you treat the vote of the British people to leave the European Union with respect? You were honest in saying that you didn't think it was the right decision, but you definitely played at the boundaries of what was reasonable and possible in Parliament with various amendments that you allowed votes to happen on, which people said that was not in keeping with any tradition that had gone before it. Do you look back on that and think you did the right thing?
I do look back on it and think I did the right thing, because as far as I was concerned, what was at issue was the primacy of Parliament. You're quite right, there had been a referendum. The referendum took place in June 2016. There had been a very important event interceding after that and before the 2019 election, and that was the 2017 election. And Theresa May called that election with the support of Parliament to try to get a proper majority of her own, and she not only didn't get it, she lost the majority that had been bequeathed to her by David Cameron. So there was a new scenario. My point was simply this: the House of Commons must have its say, and the House of Commons must have its way. So, look, none of us is without flaw. To err is human.
But you do it again.
We are all blemished, but would I do the same thing again, standing up for the rights of the legislature to question, probe, scrutinise, challenge, contradict and expose the errors of omission or commission of the government of the day? I would. What is at issue here, I think, with the Prime Minister is very simply a matter of regard for the truth. And my concern is that the Prime Minister, Mr Boris Alexander de Pfeffel Johnson, has an insouciant disregard for the truth. And if that is allowed to persist unchecked, that is an extremely dangerous phenomenon which is corrosive of public trust in politics. And there are specific examples, Tom. The Prime Minister has said that under the Conservative government, the economy has grown by 73%. He said that in Parliament. Actually, the real figure since 2010 is 20%, less than a third of what he claimed. The 73% figure would have to include 13 years of Labour government. He says we've restored the nurses' bursary. Well, yes, he's introduced a maintenance grant of £5,000, but under the old nurses' bursary, tuition fees of nurses were paid. They're not now paid, so that was deeply misleading. He says that 400,000 fewer families are living in poverty and has been contradicted by the Children's Commissioner. In none of these cases has he corrected the record.
Well, so you run through the areas where you think there's been some misdirection. Two quick things then. If Parliament is being maligned and pushed to one side, do you think MPs have been quick enough to call for or to start an inquiry into coronavirus?
Well, I certainly think that there are a lot of MPs who want such an inquiry, and I hope there'll be such an inquiry.
You think that there should be?
I do think that there should be a public inquiry into the way in which the phenomenon came about and what lessons could be learned from it, and I think it should be judge-led, and it has to be independent. One can't have one of these soft soap, whitewash-type inquiries which are set up under the auspices and subject to the control of the Prime Minister of the day. That's absolutely hopeless. It's got to be genuinely independent. So I don't think MPs have been too slow to call for that. I suppose what I would say also is that on the matter of truth-telling, I don't know what's going to happen because I'm not a soothsayer or a diviner, but I do know what has happened, Tom, which is that several opposition party leaders have asked for the right to have a motion before the House given precedence on the question of truth or its absence in prime ministerial statements, and that matter should have precedence and be voted on in the House. Now, I don't know whether that's going to happen, but if you ask me, do I think that such a motion should be given precedence, the honest answer is I do. I think lots of good steps have been taken in the light of the virus to try to get an approximation to, or an imitation of what Parliament should be like. I pay tribute to the House authorities and Speaker Hoyle for establishing the virtual Parliament, but it's deeply suboptimal. And the scrutiny of the coronavirus regulations and a very substantial curtailment of personal liberties was absolutely minimal and in some cases zilch. My point here is that
do you think the decision would have been different had more scrutiny been attached to decisions around lockdown?
I think scrutiny always improves decision-making. So, yes, it could have been better. And I suppose my key point is that we can't reinvent the past, but looking to the future, I think the key thing is these great curtailments and the denial of the cut and thrust and the vibrancy and the spontaneity of parliamentary exchange cannot be allowed to become the new normal. We've got to get back to a robust, dynamic, interrogative Parliament in which people hold the executive to account. And by the way, I don't know about this business of curtains, but I would just gently lob into the pot, Tom, if I may. The Prime Minister could always have approached his old friend George Osborne and seen whether Osborne and Little might do him a deal and offer him a cut price.
Well, the Sunday Mirror says he's gone to a Tory donor. Just very funny, because I've eaten...
Well, I think we need to know who paid the bill in the first instance. It is a blindingly simple and straightforward question to which we need an answer. And it's not good enough just to say, oh, well, in the end, the Prime Minister did. The reason people, and I say this to your listeners, are asking the question is that if the bill was originally paid by somebody else, there is either the reality or the appearance of an obligation to that person, and that is extremely dangerous and undesirable. So the Electoral Commission should look at it, and if the Prime Minister is going to tell the truth to the Electoral Commission, which no doubt he is, and he certainly must, he should also tell the unvarnished truth to the House of Commons.
So tell me the truth on this final question, because I've eaten into a lot of your Sunday morning. Based on everything you've said, do you think you could vote Conservative?
Well, people probably will in large numbers.
Do you think, what about you?
Thursday. Well, I think that my vote is between me and the ballot box, and I didn't comment on that matter other than in respect of the referendum. Wisely or unwisely, I admitted that in the referendum I voted to...
But you're a former Conservative MP.
I'm a former Conservative MP, but I haven't...
And you're not sure?
...of the Conservative Party. I haven't been a member of the Conservative Party since the evening, I think approximately 8:30 p.m. on the 22nd of June 2009. And if you're asking me, is it my ambition to return to the Conservative and Unionist fold, the answer is an unequivocal no.